This is number 3 in the series, and we're dealing with some old guitars here. This is the first Model 45 that Martin made, and an extremely important historic guitar. If you think of, this is number 3 in the series, and about early Martin guitars, it's hard to over-exaggerate the importance of Martin guitars. If you think of Gene Autry, or Elvis, or Hank Williams, or any of the number of players that really changed the way we think, changed so much of this planet, and were exports to the rest of the world from America that still exists today. And it started with Martin's insistence on excellence. And this, the first Model 145 ever, is a fantastic example. I'll remind you too that we have items for Christmas. A lot of people come to us, and this seems silly, like a silly commercial, but we have stuff that's cheap that you can buy for gifts. It's that time of year. What do you buy the guitar nerd that shops at Willie's? These 2020 calendars are always big hits. They show a variety of really cool guitars on there that are dream-worthy. We put different types of art in there. There's old radios and that, so it's of interest to anybody. And then because it's our 30th anniversary, we have these limited edition shirts. Obviously, we're not going to make these too long because it's, 30 years. So here's part 3 of our ode to early Martins. A piece of Martin legacy lies in their pearl trim guitars. Now, as I said before, this is collectibles can sometimes be graded in value to how fancy or how rare they are. Common collectibles generally go for less, but they're of interest to a lot of people. When you get into some really fancy pearl trim, this becomes very rare because this has always been very expensive. In the early days, Martin didn't want to do pearl trim. They insisted that was for the garish guitar makers that were masking their lack of skill. Martin was always about choice of wood, how to put the wood together, and tone. You'll see companies like Washburn with wide bits of binding that stand out. They look good in a photograph. That means they sell well in a catalog you get from Sears. But Martin was very stoic. They were about integrity and tone. They did, in the late 1800s, put pearl trim on a guitar on smaller bodied guitars, and that was meant, as the catalog said, for women. A He-Man in the late 1880s didn't have pearl on his guitar. No. But they started to discover that the larger guitars marketed to men, and this, by the way, is a style 1. This is a smaller style 2. This is before they came up with the standardization that we know, the style O, double O, triple O, dreadnought, way before. This, my friends, was the first style 1, a large guitar, 45. This was based on its value. Its wholesale price was $45. And that's what they got the model name from. A ridiculous amount of money in the day. So you had pearl trim on a 45 that goes around the soundboard, around the sound hole. It even goes around the heel on 45s, around the side of the body, around the back. Again, this is made about the time they had electricity in New York, but no other major city. And steam power was in place, but there is no power tools. This was all installed by hand. Ordering this took months and months, and they used the finest wood. This is, and I'll say it again, the first style 45 that Martin produced. Mike Longworth wrote several books. He was a Martin historian, really one of the first guys, went through the 60s. Mike Longworth went through all the records and started really bringing forward Martin history for all of us. He's written a bunch of books. All of them are out of print. Some of them are reprinted, and other authors have added their names to it, like Dick Boak, our pal, who's a genius and just left Martin. Mike Longworth died in the 70s, but his books, here, let's see Mike Longworth's face. Mike Longworth brought back the D45. There was 45 level trim until the start of World War II, and then there was no 45 level trim. There was no pearl trim from 1942 until 1968, and Mike Longworth brought it back. As an executive at Martin, he brought back the pearl trim guitars. He did his research, and this guitar used to belong to Mike Longworth. Mike Longworth said this is the first 45 level Martin. Now, it's a fantastic sounding guitar, deep, beautiful, book-matched Brazilian rosewood, chosen for its evenness of grain, chosen for its tone. They'd spend a lot of time with wood doing this. This is an ivory bridge. You get with these later guitars more volume. Just because visuals are better for me, and I bet for you. This is a 1904. Style 1, which is the big body then, 45. Let me read you something on this. I told you this is going to be a little long, but here, while you glance at this, this guitar is the most valuable and certainly the most historically significant of this collection. This instrument was once the most prized possession of Mike Longworth's collection. The Style 45 is the most sought after of all Martins. Recently, a 1939 D45 sold for $250,000. This specific guitar, this one, is the very first 45 that Martin Guitars ever made. In light of its historical importance, it seems appropriate that this guitar is from the collection of Mike Longworth. As Mike Longworth's collection to Style 45 Martins extends beyond his longtime role as a company historian and author of the first books on Martin's history. The old-time Tennessee-based luthier was hired by Martin to perform inlay work when Martin revived the D45 in 1968. Martin created the special commemorative edition of 91 D45 Mike Longworth's guitar after his death in 2003. Only 5 of these 145s were made after this 1904 model. The last one in 1919. Only 5 Model 1 45s were made. This, my friends, when we get into history, whether you do watches, cars, stamps, Pez bottles, there's so many things that you might get into as a collector, but this, for us, is important because of what Martin did. Elvis played a Martin guitar. John Lennon played a Martin guitar. A magnificent example. I just wanted to share this bit of history with you. This is something we don't get to see. I'm sorry to tell you, this won't last, but you should come in if you can and warm your hands over this.